On this episode, in the Digit Test Labs, we are pitting three sub 25,000 rupees phones in a 6-hour performance and battery drain marathon. Yes, you heard that. Not high-end, but pure mass market mid-range phones, the devices which drive the actual sales. We have the new kid on the block, the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite versus the iQOO Z11x versus the Poco X7. Now, for obvious reasons, the Nord CE6 Lite and Z11x are walking into this with the clear advantage over the Poco for having 7000 mAh and 7200 mAh batteries respectively. However, before you jump to conclusions, you are in for a surprise. So watch until the end as we have got our setup ready with all phones being 100% charged. Brightness is set to 500 nits manually, the display profiles are set to natural, the refresh rates are set to default, and all phones are connected to the same 5 GHz Wi-Fi network. Hello everyone, Aman here for Digit. We are in the Digit Test Labs and now let's get started. I am kicking things off with 2 hours of pure performance testing. Now I know what you're thinking. These are mid-range mass market phones, not dedicated gaming ones, but there's a reason I'm starting here. The OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite makes some pretty bold claims about 144 FPS in casual games and 90 FPS in shooters, and I wanted to see if it lives up to the hype. And so with Subway Surfers, I was actually surprised. The Nord CE6 Lite was constantly hitting that 143 to 144 FPS mark, making the gameplay feel incredibly fluid. In comparison, the iQOO Z11x and the Poco X7 were both locked at 60 FPS. It is one of those things where you don't think you need a high refresh rate for a casual game until you actually experience the smooth performance, and naturally, the Nord is significantly smoother. When we switched over to COD Mobile, the gap closed a bit, but the experience stayed consistent. All three devices managed to hit the 90 FPS target, which is great for this price segment. However, the Nord CE6 Lite felt just a bit more stable during intense gunfights and stayed remarkably cool at 33.3 degrees Celsius, whereas the iQOO started climbing towards 37 degrees Celsius. We also squeezed in some BGMI rounds where the Nord was the only one in this group to actually touch and maintain that 90 FPS mark, while the other two stayed in the 50 to 60 FPS range, which is quite solid. Now, to wrap up this first round, we transitioned into a series of benchmarks to see how these Apex and Turbo chips actually handled sustained stress. In Geekbench 6, the results were very interesting. The Nord CE6 Lite led the pack in both single-core and multi-core performance, clocking in at 1068 and 2953 respectively. The Poco X7 followed closely behind, while the iQOO Z11x trailed slightly. It is clear that OnePlus has tuned the Dimensity 7400 Apex chip to handle heavy lifting quite well. In Anther 2, the Nord CE6 Lite went past the 1 million mark, scoring 1.04 million while maintaining a comfortable surface temperature of 34.6 degrees Celsius. The iQOO wasn't far behind in raw score, but was definitely running warmer at 38.3 degrees Celsius. Finally, in the 3D Mark Wildlife stress test to check the graphics consistency, the Nord CE6 Lite turned in a 99.1% stability score. To be fair, the iQOO and Poco were right there too with 99.3% and 99.5% respectively. This tells us that this entire segment has become excellent at managing thermals, but the Nord sets a very high initial performance ceiling that it just refuses to drop from. So after this grueling 2-hour gauntlet, both the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite and the iQOO Z11x are sitting at 85% battery, while the Poco X7 has already dropped to 77%. It's a solid start for the big battery phones, but we've still got 4 more hours to go. So with the heavy lifting out of the way, we gave the phones and our thumbs a bit of a breather with a 2-hour YouTube video playback session. Now, in the sub 25,000 rupees price segment, you usually see a divide in display tech. The Poco X7 sports an AMOLED panel which naturally gives you those deep inky blacks that look great in a dark room. However, the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite and the iQOO Z11x take a different approach with their LCD panels. What I appreciate about the Nord's tuning is the natural color profile. It is not overly saturated. In fact, it's a very clean color calibration that makes long-form content easy on the eyes. Plus, for those of us who are sensitive to PWM flickering, often found on affordable AMOLED screens, a high-quality LCD like the one on the Nord is actually much more comfortable choice for long hours of looking at the screen. But the real story here isn't just about the tech, it's about how that tech sips power, and after 2 hours of continuous streaming at about 500 nits, the efficiency of the Dimensity 7400 Apex chip really started to shine. Despite the Poco having the theoretically more efficient display tech, it was actually the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite that held onto its lead more effectively during this round. We started the round with the Nord and iQOO at 85%, but by the end, the Nord CE6 Lite was sitting at 73%. While the iQOO dropped to 71%, the Poco, which started the round at 77%, tumbled down to 65%. Moving into the 1 hour video recording round, this is where we usually see these mid-range chipsets start to feel the heat. We are splitting the R between the rear and front cameras. I started the recording with the phones at 31.5 degrees Celsius for the iQOO, 29 degrees Celsius for the Nord, and 30 degrees Celsius for the Poco. Before we dive into the results, let's talk hardware. The OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite features a 50 megapixel main camera paired with a 2 megapixel depth sensor. For your selfies and video calls, there's an 8 megapixel front camera. While it can shoot 4K 30 FPS from the rear, it is capped at 1080p 30 FPS for the front. The iQOO Z11x also has a 50MP plus 2MP rear setup along with a 32 megapixel front camera. You can shoot up to 4K 30 FPS videos from both the front and back. The Poco X7 features a triple 50MP main plus 8MP ultra wide and a 2MP macro setup. There's a 20 megapixel front camera. For video recording, there's 4K 30 FPS support on the rear and 1080p 60 FPS on the front. So as we hit the 30-minute mark on the rear camera recording, I did a quick temperature check. The iQOO was at 41 degrees Celsius. The OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite was sitting pretty at 32.6 degrees Celsius. And the Poco was at 39.1 degrees Celsius. I have to say, seeing the Nord stay that cool while recording 4K video is seriously impressive for this segment. It was barely even lukewarm to the touch. Then we flipped over to the front-facing camera for the final 30 minutes. By the end of this session, the temperatures had settled even further. The iQOO was at 35.6 degrees Celsius, the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite was at 31.6 degrees Celsius, and the Poco was at 34 degrees Celsius. The thermal discipline on the Nord is definitely the best I've seen in this test. So after a total of 5 hours, the battery numbers are telling a very clear story. The OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite is still leading the pack with 63% battery remaining. The iQOO Z11x is right behind at 59%, but the Poco X7 is really starting to sweat now, sitting at 50%. So for the final stretch of our 6-hour gauntlet, I ran an hour of Instagram on all 3 smartphones because let's be real, this is probably the most real-world test of the lot because most of us spend a huge chunk of our day just scrolling through reels and stories. And by this stage, the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite was already in a commanding position and it just continued to flex its efficiency. With that, after the final hour of social media, the results are officially in. The OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite finished at 56% battery. The iQOO Z11x put up a solid fight, ending at 51%. The Poco X7 ended the test at 43% battery. So after these 6 hours of absolute torture, a lot of things are clear. While the iQOO and Nord walked into this with a massive battery advantage over the Poco, the OnePlus Nord CE6 Lite is the one that really stood out for its consistency. It didn't win on battery life, it won on thermal discipline. Staying at 32.6 degrees Celsius during 4K video recording from the rear camera is unheard of in this segment. When you factor in that it was the only phone to actually hit 144 FPS in casual games and 90 FPS in both BGMI and Call of Duty Mobile, it becomes a very easy recommendation for anyone who wants high performance along with solid thermals. The Poco X7 and the iQOO Z11x are definitely no slouches, but for that performance per watt crown, the Nord CE6 Lite takes the win. It proves that with the right optimization, you can have a mass market smartphone that handles heavy lifting like a pro. And that's all for this video in the Digit Test Labs. I'll catch you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.